being here. I went out to assess damage and met with who were impacted, stopping in to check on a few of the hardest hit communities. Road and bridge washouts, the homes destroyed, the damage is significant. But as I visited towns yesterday and spoke with people, I was reminded of how resilient Vermonters really are. Even in the face of devastation, I saw them come together, doing what they can for their neighbor to get through this. We're continuing work to manage the response, and the coordinating with town officials and local emergency management directors to assess damage and provide assistance when necessary. This work is ongoing. Officials still very much in response, focused on life and safety and urgent needs. It will take a few days before we have a more complete understanding of the damage and what is needed for recovery and what we have to support. Today, on updates, we want to focus on the things Vermont can do and should be doing over the next few days to get their homes, businesses, and property cleaned up and dry, old, and further damage. While many went through this last, we know it's overwhelming, and we want to make sure folks remember the key steps to help people get to a better place much faster and much sooner. Commissioner Morris, specific steps regarding documenting damage, cleaning out homes and yards, disposing of debris, and where to find help and equipment if needed. Dr. Levine will also offer everyone stays safe. So, I said yesterday, we can all use what we learned last year to act and strengthen our response, and that starts getting homes, businesses, and communities clean and dry as quickly as possible. I go to Commissioner Moore.
Thank you, Governor. Good morning. Most rescue operations have wrapped up. We have released out of Swiftwater assets. State teams are back in their community. Stand by until all rivers are below flood stage. Approximately 120 people, 15 and have assisted with dozens of evacuations, not include the many rescues and assists carried out by local first responders. As of this morning, we are aware of 2 deaths to be weather related. You have reported on both of them, but for the record, on Wednesday night, 33-year-old Dylan Kempton of Peachum died, and yesterday, John Nice of Concord died. Our thoughts and prayers go out to the families and friends of both men. Regarding weather and any future flooding, there is some that continued into this morning. Most rivers are receding and no new flooding is expected. The following rivers were moderate flood stage, but were actively receding as of 8 o'clock this morning. The Passaic River in Passumpsic, the Winooski River in Essex Junction, and the Lamoille in Jeffersonville. Storms are expected for today and Saturday. No significant widespread rainfall is anticipated through the weekend, but there is a high. The weather's going to be in the high 80s, possibly low 90s in the weekend. Should take precautions such as start when it's cooler, take frequent breaks, drink plenty of water. I think we'll have more to say about that. Power outages. As of approximately 150 known power outages. Note that some restorations in this case are going to take long because crews can't get to some places that might be at the end of a run or are otherwise unable to be accessed because of the damaged local or state roads. 150 reports of damage to 211. We strongly suspect and we ask that you please report damage. I'll talk more about 211 in a few. So here's what we are doing. The State Emergency Operations Center remains active. We continue to encourage local emergency management directors to reach out when needs exceed local capacity. And we are here 24 hours. Emergency Operations Center staff are actively working with communities they can to help communities manage flood-related damage. Fire safety inspectors were in the field yesterday, inspect as quickly as possible. 58 inspections were completed. They will be out again today in the hardest hit communities. And here's what impacted people and communities should be doing. I'm going to describe some specific steps that residents and communities can take right now to move forward and begin the process of recovery. The first is document your damage. Video before you begin and proceed through your cleanup efforts. Save documentation closer to the thresholds could trigger federal assistance. And if you're planning to fix the damage yourself, or I guess live with the damage, please document it and report it to us by helping us get federal assistance thresholds. Step 3 is to start cleaning up and drying up. Get the wet stuff out. We have dry weather forecasted for the next several days, so take advantage of it and get the wet stuff out of the house. Step 4, move all flood-related debris. I just want to clearly state flood-related debris to the right-of-way. Your community communicate local communities in making those plans. For communicators, continue to use to communicate your needs to the State Emergency Operations Center. We cannot help you not know what you need for support. And lastly, for everyone, remain vigilant and be safe. This means staying out of floodwaters, observing road signs, not putting yourself rescued. There is a lot of damage to state and local roads. Crews are working feverishly to make repairs, but it's going to take time to get everything reopened. So if you see a road closed sign or signage, please respect them. Do it for yourself so you can stay safe, but also do it so that you don't cause more initial repair work that may have begun. I want to say a word about volunteering and accessing volunteer help. Reality has set in. Most people impacted by the flooding, and they've realized that cleanup and recovery is not going to be easy. Here to help. Volunteer assistance is available for those cleanups. Vermonters can call the state's crisis to request help in cleaning up debris, mucking out basements, or other recovery work. 802-242-2054 or go to Crisis Cleanup, altogether, crisiscleanup.org. If you would like to volunteer to help your neighbors, more help is always needed. If you would like to volunteer for storm cleanup, please register at www.vermont.gov/volunteer. Or you can simply roll up your sleeves, grab a shovel, check with your town or an impacted town to see if there is a coordinated event that you could take part in. As always, cash is king. Cash donations are the most effective way to get aid to communities in need. You can donate to the Vermont Community Foundation's Response and Recovery Fund online at vermontfloodresponse.org. Donations of food, clothing, and household items are best handled at the local level. Community charities have the best information about the needs in that particular community, and they can always use donations. All I have for today, and I will be available for questions later, and I'll turn it over to Secretary Flynn.
Thank you, Commissioner Morrison. Good morning. Before I start listing, I just want to reemphasize what I said yesterday, that I'm speaking primarily about V-Trans' own state network, and that is not to fail to recognize the widespread damage that we've all seen, much of it thanks to you all for the pictures that you're sharing on media. First thing I would like to say is that the Agency of Transportation will be releasing $29.5 million in town highway aid payments early August. The first $14 million is working its way out the door the first part of next week. This is formula money for every town in Vermont, which is part of our budget. This is a 6-month slug of money we're releasing immediately to help towns. So now I'll go through the list of closures. Yesterday, there were 54 state-owned roads closed. I'm going to say today that number has dropped to 18. In that 18, it includes state-owned bridges that currently remain closed. Follows Route 15 at the Wrong Way Bridge, Route 17 in Addison, Route 17E in Bristol-Starksboro, which includes one of the closed bridges, Route 116 in Heinsberg, which also includes one of the closed bridges, Route 5 in St. Johnsbury near Hospital Hill, 2 sites in Barton on Route 5, both closed bridges, Route 16 in East Hardwick, also a closed bridge, Route 58 in Orleans, Route 2 in Plainfield, which includes a closed bridge, multiple sites between on Route 12, Route 17 in Facein, Route 100 in Duxbury Bridge, Route 100B in Moortown, which is a closed bridge. Have that bridge open next week. Route 302, multiple sites in East Barry. Route 302 at the intersection in Groton. Route 102, the Maidstone State Highway. Route 122 in Linden, in Canaan, on the Canadian border at the port of entry. On the Lamoille, I want to report 3 segments that are open for recreational use. Swanton to Cambridge Junction, St. Johnsbury to Danville, to Hardwick Depot. Yesterday at this time, we know the extent of damage. In sections that I haven't mentioned, there are damage. And in one section in West Danville, there's a fairly significant spot that has been destroyed. The Missisquoi line is fully open and the open. Active Railroad and Amtrak. We have 8 closures. Barry, Barnett, Passumpsic, Orleans, country. The western corridor between, this is new, and this is the route of the Ethan Allen Amtrak. The train is currently stopping in Middlebury, and Amtrak passengers are being bused to Burlington and bused back to Middlebury. Of course, this also significantly freight movement into Burlington, because it will be a fairly quick fix. The St. Lawrence and Atlantic between the and North and Island Pond. This is a Genesee and Wyoming Railroad. Reports this morning to me of 9 washouts in the NECR line here in central Vermont, in Middlesex. This is also a Genesee and Wyoming Railroad. It is the line of the Amtrak Vermonter, as well as freight. There are areas in Middlesex the Vermont is not running, nor freight. Public transit, the Morrisville Shopper and the US Route 2 commuter are closed, are operating as scheduled. And again, I just reemphasize the Town Highway Aid Formula money that every town, including those most significantly impacted, will begin to see. So at this time, it over to Swiftwater Trader Mike King.
I gave his update.
Roger that.
Is it?
Then
Sure, Julie.
Secretary Julie Moore.
Today I'm going to provide information and updates on dams, parks and recreation, water and wastewater facilities, flood-related corridors, and landslides. Before I want to emphasize a handful of the points Commissioner Morrison made and add a couple A&R specific. We encourage all Vermonters to avoid floodwaters, recognizing they may be filled with pollutants and hazards. It's important to follow advisories from state and town officials about drinking water safety. We're encouraging homeowners and building owners to contact the spill response team if your basement has become contaminated with floodwater, causing your storage tanks to leak. As your flood trip this weekend, please set aside any pile and check closures before you head to a state park, land, or one of Vermont's many trails. There's a full set of information available on the ANR/flood webpage for where we've compiled all related information. Speaking to damming, total rainfall maps, the Dam Safety Program targeted outreach to 218 dams under our jurisdiction, in Caledonia, Chittenden, Essex, Franklin, Wales, Orleans, we two rounders reaching out directly to 218 dam owners. There were 16 dam owners we were unable to reach via email and followed up with phone calls, and only dam without act. Our team is continuing to monitor dams around the state and will work with these dam owners and our fellows to stay current conditions. I'm pleased to report the Winooski River Valley flood control reservoirs continue to do their job well. Levels in the Waterbury Reservoir are stabilizing with plenty of storage remaining, and in Wrightsville and East Area continue to be assessed as needed. I have an update from yesterday's press conference where Commissioner Batchelder told about Harvey's Lake Dam. He was on site yesterday afternoon and found the dam over top. It does not appear to be damaged, and therefore we do not pour down roads and infrastructure. We have also completed inspections of 7 particularly at-risk Northeast Kingdom dams yesterday afternoon, and no damage. Frequent contact with the owners of other large power dams, including Green Mountain Power and Morrisville Water, that's revealed no ongoing concerns for dam safety. Included proactive outreach. Currently, Berry City, Lindenville, Barnett, Plainfield, St. Johnsbury, Hardwick, and Richmond have identified concerns. There are 5 community boil water notices or districts in Barnett and individual water districts in St. Johnsbury and Berry City. We also have 9 wastewater treatment facilities that were impacted during this week's event. 7 of these systems experienced operational issues that we anticipate will resolve as floodwaters recede. Currently, we believe there are 2 facilities with structural damage, and these are the water facilities in Plainfield and Hardwick. Towns and facilities to find immediate solutions and begin the process of long-term fixes. Other towns in central Vermont and the Northeast Kingdom may be added in days as contacts are made and 211 reports are made available, actively reaching out to those wastewater facilities in known flood zones that haven't reported to the state yet. In terms of parks, assessments indicate that really Region 4, which is our northeast parks, bore the brunt of the storm. Hardest hit areas appear to be Groton State Forest and include Ricker Pond, Big Deer, and Sayon Lodge, Waterbury Center, and Waterbury Reservoir's remotes. We are canceling reservations at Ricker Pond, Stillwater, Smuggler Notch, and Waterbury remote sites next week. Park staff are contacting individuals with reservations. We will continue to evaluate conditions and reopen parks based on the safety of visitors and park staff. Please site or Trail Finder website for the latest information. Speaking to landslides, RG 4 reports of flood-related landslides. 2 new incidents in Moortown and Elmore that are being evaluated. A third parcel that was already in the process of buyout following experienced additional slope failure in Wolcott, and there's an unconfirmed slope failure in Moncton that we will all be visiting. The team will continue to monitor reports and conduct field visits as needed. Finally, on the waste management end, our waste management division is prepared to offer support as needed. Please report spills of oil, fuel, or other hazardous materials that you may have experienced as a result of flooding by calling 802-828-1138. The state has contractors available to assist homeowners who have heating oil releases or see a sheen on floodwaters in their home. And finally, our team of river management engineers is still in the very early and are working with local liaisons to understand where there may be in-stream debris piles or other threatening in future flood events. We will work over the next week to create a better picture. If you have any questions about managing the river corridor on your property, please contact a DC river engineer before you begin work. Again, all of this information is available and being regularly updated on our webpage, am.vermont.gov/. Thank you, and with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Levine.
Thank you. Good morning. I'd just like to thank everyone involved in this response for working so quickly and so hard to keep Vermonters safe. And to all Vermonters, your willingness to help and take care of one another ceases to inspire me. Like everyone, I'm sorry we're here again talking about recovery. after the state was devastated by floods. These weather events continue to challenge our collective resilience, especially for those of us who worked so hard to rebuild and were directly impacted yet again. Unfortunately, we do know that climate to make severe weather a threat to our world, so let's understand how it harms our health and what we can do in the short and long term to help protect against these impacts. As you heard yesterday, one of those impacts can be on mental health. I know that experiences of your own, your neighbor, your community, or just the stress and uncertainties surrounding crises like these can take a toll on mental health. Please recognize that it is completely okay and reach out for help if you know someone who is struggling. There is a national line you can call or text for support, 1-800-985-5999, and of Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, as Commissioner Hawes reminded everyone yesterday. As we all work towards recovering from this disaster, I want to share basic guidance to stay as safe and healthy as possible and give a few simple take-home messages. First, let's start. If you're on a municipal water system, as you just heard from Secretary Moore, follow their guidance on boil water or do not drink orders. But if you are on a private well or spring and think that was flooded, assume that your water is contaminated. Don't use it for cooking, baby formula, washing food, or brushing teeth until you have it tested. Get your water from a known safe source, such as bottled water or a municipal building. Starting at noon today, water is available to order for free through our line impacted by this week's flooding. Again, this is not for people on municipal water supplies. This is for those on. We want to try to reduce any barriers you might have to getting a test kit. And if that proves challenging, going to our website, healthvermont.org, or calling our laboratory, you can get one by contacting your office as well. Now, boiling water and other organisms, so it can be much safer after that. However, keep in mind that process does not is otherwise contaminated. So if your water looks cloudy, full of cells like chemicals or fuel, certainly do not drink it. Next, swim and water safety. Even once the skies have cleared, people and pets stay out of any body of water after a heavy event. High water strong linger and carry debris several days after a storm, or boating in these areas dangerous for anyone. Bodies of water can also be contaminated by microorganisms, fuel, and wastewater runoff. Not the news you want to hear prior to an anticipated very hot weekend, but certainly swimming in contaminated water after a flood can result in serious safety risks or problems from infection. Best to consider activity or place to cool off until waters are calm and clear again. Next, returning to your home. Wait until officials say it is safe and standing water has gone down. Power lines, gas leaks, or damaged fuel tanks. If you smell a rotten egg smell, which might be natural gas, or hear hissing, leave immediately your utility. If any electrical circuits are wet or are in or near water, turn off the power if it's safe to do so. And of course, as we always say in the wintertime, use a generator in the garage and 20 feet from any window vent. Finally, cleaning your home. If your home has been flooded and closed for 6 months, again, that your home has mold. You'll need to remove moldy items in your home by opening doors and windows, and electricity is safe. Who should not be helping clean up after a flood would include children, people who have any kind of breathing problems, and people who have symptoms. Wear protective clothing, including N95 and gloves. You can clean moldy items that do not absorb water using soap, but other materials like fabrics and cushions will probably need to be thrown away. Do not eat or drink anything that may have touched flood water, and throw away contaminated food, along with any foods that have not been properly for more than a day. You can find more information at Health for Vermont of Flood. I'll now turn it back to Q&A.
We'll now open it up to questions.
Have you been in contact with, say, our federal delegation or starting any conversation?
I had a conversation the day before the FEMA director, Criswell, and since then we've had given the congressional delegation a briefing as to what I think that happened yesterday, as well as with the delegation. So we've been in contact with everyone. We'll be assessing the damage. We'll be obviously, but we need more information in order to provide that.
If we are granted help from FEMA, given the long, really complicated process that a lot of Vermonters have been over the last year, what's your expectation of how much FEMA will be able to help, and what should Vermonters be looking for over the next 6 months here?
Yeah, I think we have to level this year, and since FEMA doesn't solve all your problems, especially with individual instances. Frustration typically comes through because you have damage to your home. You expect that FEMA will come in and rectify, make you whole, but that doesn't happen. There's a cap on that. There's a $42,000 cap, and that doesn't take care of even today. So, but there is private insurance as well you have with your homeowners, which is why we're trying to encourage people with any damage at all to go to 211, fill out the form, whatever damage, and let's meet whatever threat we need to make for public assistance as well as individual assistance. It's really important to do that, and whether or not you're going to get anything in return, it will help the overall cause to do so.
Over the last year was that recovery work, navigating through all of the paperwork is a full-time job on top of the job that people have to make ends meet, taking care of your kids, etc. Does the state have resources to just physically, like the bureaucracy or the phase of paperwork?
Yeah, we try to do whatever we can. We understand it can get complicated. Possible. I look for someone else who wants to jump in. Todd? It's like,
So it's a great question, and I think we have learned a lot working through the FEMA process. Last year, as we needed and where FEMA was able to step in, we brought on some resources, and we'll look into doing that again this year in an interim process to support people. And, you know, this is the nature of a crisis like this. We do have partners who are doing disaster case management. Of course, they were also impacted by the flood and need to recover. And that process, and I want to emphasize this, is a long-term recovery process. The other element I would highlight here is that we are fortunate in a sense that where we stand on the road to recovery from the 2023 flood, we have a tremendous number of volunteers working in long-term recovery groups in many of the same communities that were hit before. Those are going to be crucial assets in the recovery phase to really helping connect individuals who've been harmed with and whose homes and livelihoods have been damaged with recovery assets and the real work, which again is a very long-term process. So we will continue to work with FEMA, of course, and we also will look to the volunteer processes and some of the state resources we've brought online.
this might be a good time to level set expectations as well with businesses, because that was a source of confusion before. We encourage everyone with any damage to call 211 so we can collect the data that we need to request assistance for public assistance as well as individual assistance. But it also gives us a tool to accumulate and determine how much damage we have to businesses. And while FEMA does not take care of any business damage, there are SBA loans available that's triggered. But we also established our own for last year, and that was BGAP. But we have to have a federal or legislation to do so. But it will help us make our case if we have the in the queue. So we would encourage everyone with whatever you have, call or contact 211 through the online process. Data necessary to determine what our next steps are. Yeah, why don't you go ahead.
You did such a great job with that, but I did want to mention that the Agency of Commerce and Community, we were able to stand up a resource center that we had after last year's flooding. It's called the Severe Storm Resource Guide, www.accd.gov/flood. And on that guide, there's a variety of information. And, you know, first and foremost, I want to acknowledge that, you know, impacted business owners and employers are probably cleaning up right now. And so if they're not listening now, our website gives them an opportunity to go back and, you know, take a peek later at information that might be helpful. Some of what was covered today as well, we will be updating with. But for those who are listening who may be helping their friends that are business owners and employers navigate, again, I encourage people to go look at this resource page. And as the governor mentioned, there are separate forms for businesses and homeowners. So if you're a business owner, there's a form in there. And as I mentioned, as the governor mentioned, that will help us understand the extent of the damage that people are dealing with. And I understand this is fluid, and right now they're cleaning out, and that is the most important, is to clean up and get rid of that mold. But when they have time and after they've made a way through that cleanup, and maybe somebody can help them and they start to document that will significantly help us in terms of recognizing what financial or what property damage they've had, what financial impact they're experiencing. So we can't emphasize that enough, that's helpful to us for intel. Again, on that page also it talks about philanthropic support. Again, after last year's flood, we got significant help through the generosity of Vermonters. So we'll be adding, as we learn of opportunities for Vermonters to make donations through safe sites to donate on, we'll be putting that on there. And I'll provide more updates in the days ahead. Again, once we know business owners are maybe, they've gotten through some of that cleanup. One more thing I just wanted to stress for some of the employers that went through this a year ago and maybe were spared this time, which I'm very glad that happened. You may recall the feeling when somebody walked through your door, the relief that you had, that people showed up to help you. So think about some of the areas you're seeing pictures and the impact of people cleaning out and mucking out. So whether you have some downtime or you have friends that are asking how can they help, I want to point back to that volunteer page. The importance of getting out there when it's safe, but getting out there and just picking up a shovel and putting your muck boots on and helping people clean up is it is such an uplifting and an inspirational help to all of us, and it's going to mitigate and keep the damage, the cost down if we can get that cleaned up sooner rather than later. So that's all I have for now. We'll keep you updated.
For the governor, for Secretary Moore, whether it's yesterday's storms, last year's, or really kind of any somewhat of significant rainfall, obviously rivers overflow, but also, I'm blanking on the word all of a sudden. I'll come back. Culverts. It seems like washed out culverts are always a big issue no matter what the rainfall is. I mean, is there any way the state could be proactive, maybe it's just aging infrastructure, but looking at some of these more vulnerable culverts, whether it's through a legislative study? I know that would all cost money, but what can be done? Because it always just seems like these culverts are breaking and that's what's leading to a lot of the water overflow.
Yeah, and it's a little bit complicated. We always assume that just upsizing a culvert is the answer. But you have to look downstream as well, because when you increase the capacity, you're also increasing the flow, and somebody downstream is going to be impacted. So it's a little bit more complicated than that. We are constantly looking at culverts. Might have Joe talk about that, as well as Julie on her end. But they're important, obviously. And when we have structures that are impacted in some way and aren't cleaned out and have debris in them, that leads to a problem in the future. So we've after one of the lessons learned, I think, with the last year's storm was to protect some of the stormwater infrastructure, including culverts, but also stormwater in some of the communities, and making sure that that's all cleaned out after the storm and is constantly cleaned out. So we have the capacity to store some of that water and let it flow when it needs to, and rather than backing up into the streets. Okay, we'll start with Joe first, then go to Julie.
You're right, culverts are one of our biggest problems, and not just for the state, but for towns. Speaking for VTrans, we have 64,000 culverts just on the state network. We know where all of our culverts are. And that was quite a task. That's been a tremendous amount of work for probably the last 12 years to create that inventory, because many of those culverts were put in before most of our current employees, including me, worked here. But we've accomplished that. So you can just imagine the magnitude of trying to replace that amount of infrastructure. We do replace culverts. We do have program capital projects every year to replace culverts, and we work very closely with Secretary Moore's agency to get it right, to upsize the culverts, to take into account the environment, to take into account wildlife, fisheries, and whatnot. There's a term for that. I forget what it's called. But
habitat connectivity.
Thank you. Well, I was yes, that too. But what happens is, while we have these culverts programmed, and we work, primarily in the 9 or so months that it's easy to replace culverts, we have events like this, or we have events like Richmond 2 years ago. Just to give you a sense of magnitude, that unplanned culvert failure was $15 million. We have over 300 of those exact size and same culverts just on our interstate highway system. And I believe the number across our entire network, like that culvert alone, is something like 1,600 of the 64,000. So you are absolutely right. I'm just trying to lay out really the magnitude of trying to, upsize everything. And it's, we chip away at everything we can. I could get you a number, but I know, in fact, that we replace hundreds of culverts a year. But with 64,000, and they vary in size. They're not all certainly like Richmond. Some of them might be 18 inches. But, it's just incredibly difficult. And I would say it's even more difficult for towns. We work with towns. We grant money, not just what I spoke about today, but we have other funds through our Better Back Roads program and whatnot. But it's just it's a vulnerability, and they're out there every place.
Talk about the debris removal from last year
Yeah.
and inspecting every single one to make sure that
Yes.
we have them cleared.
So, going back to the prep for this storm, we did everything we could to inspect our system all over across our 9 regions. We worked in Barry, actually, pulling out some debris from last year that we, I guess, either had forgotten was there or didn't know was there. There was a tree. This was right down here on the belt line. We pulled the tree out, and under the tree was a trailer underwater. So, there's still debris out there from last year. But last year, after the July storms, we inspected hundreds, and I can get to that number, but I actually think it topped over 1,000. And you saw, like if you ran out Route 12, you saw limbs and tree logs shoved through bridge rail and stuff. So we also pulled all that away so that wouldn't collect more debris in the next time. So it's a constant work. I can tell you that our districts, every single week I get a report from every district in the state. We have 9. And it tells me by category everything they do. And every week there's culvert work. Every week there's culvert replacement or there's culvert cleaning. And it's just, it's a daunting task, but it's an important one. I guess I'll turn it over to Secretary Moore.
And I might only add, Vermont, following Tropical Storm Irene, adopted really robust codes and standards for how bridges and culverts are replaced. So very much building on what Secretary Flynn alluded to, setting sizing standards going forward that we know are capable of handling these kinds of more extreme events that we're seeing more frequently. So recognizing immediately following a storm, there will be a surge of work to address impacts that occurred, but also putting in place a framework that ensures, as a matter of normal business, as municipalities and VTrans is replacing bridges and culverts, they're doing it with that more current storm and extreme weather data in mind. ANR administers something called the Municipal Roads General Permit, and it relies on an inventory that each town at this point has completed, looking for those vulnerabilities in their system. We drew a lot of that framework from the work VTrans had done previously to inventory assets within their own system. And so know that over time, we will become more resilient, but it is a challenge just given the magnitude of the sheer number of bridges and culverts that exist out there.
Do we know how many, if at all, bridges and or culverts that washed out that were either replaced last year or from Tropical Storm Irene? These ones that you're mentioning?
I can get you a better answer, but what I can tell you for certainty is after Irene, I'm not aware of a bridge this time that washed out that was rebuilt after Irene, and I like to use the example of the Wrightsville Bridge, Route 131 on your way into Cavendish at an intersection called Whitesville Road. That bridge was significantly damaged in Irene, and it was built back to the standards Secretary Moore just spoke about. The area down there was heavily impacted in July of 2023. That bridge withstood everything. So that is a classic example, and I believe I know I saw on one of your stations, I apologize, this last week, a story, may have been on 5, a story of bridges in Jamaica, in Wardsboro, that were built back after Irene, that were not damaged. Obviously, that part of the state didn't get damaged. But last summer, there was some damage, obviously down in the southern part of the state. So as far as the culverts this time, it's really too soon to tell. But I'll be happy to report on that as I know more. Thank you.
Governor, where do we stand with the proposal to redevelop the north end of Barry?
We're still working on that. Pat Moulton, who was here the other day, yesterday, is overseeing that. We had hoped to receive an appropriation from Congress on that to jumpstart it, but it's difficult, especially with getting anything done in Congress at this point in time. And money appropriated doesn't appear to be in the. There are other opportunities that we're seeking out. We're delegation on that. Other pots of money where we've made application for. And we're hopeful that a couple of those will get us started. It won't be all done in one shot. It'll have to be done in phases. But there's again other opportunities with TIF districts and so forth, and working with the city council, the new mayor, in trying to get an idea of what the community wants and put that all together. There's still the need. We still need housing. We needed housing before this latest crisis, and we're going to need it. Even it's exacerbated that when I went to Plainfield yesterday and saw the 9-unit apartment house there that is no longer habitable. It just furthers the point that we need housing now.
Also, earlier this year, you let the Climate Superfund Act go into law without your signature. That bill is, of course, aimed at trying to sue fossil fuel companies to sort of recoup some of the costs for some of these expensive projects that we are looking at right now. What are the next steps from the state to get that rolling, if at all? And what is your assessment of how much that will actually help, or whether that will help?
This is all in the hands of the Attorney General at this point, and they believe that they have a case that they can make against big oil, so to speak, to recoup some of these costs. I think it's going to take not weeks, not months, probably not years, probably decades before we'll see anything back. But they're probably more confident than I am. Again, it's in their hands at this point, and probably a better question for them.
Why aren't you calling?
Because I think we're a very small state with limited resources, and this is a legal case that's going to be difficult to prove. We have to prove harm, right? And so that's a high bar, and to make that case in court is going to be very, very. Big oil has a lot of money, and who is it we are actually going to go after? So I don't know if Secretary Moore wants to add anything to that, but we have, again, concerns about setting the expectations too high on this. For some, they think that the money was much like tobacco money, but that took a long time as well, and I think this will take that much longer. Okay. Thank you all very much.